What's going on, guys? My name's Hayden Crabtree. I'm a commercial real estate investor. I'm the author of #1 new release, Skip to Flip, The Secrets the 1% Know About Commercial Real Estate Investing. But today we're not talking about my book. Today we're talking about one of my all-time favorite life-altering books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I want to talk to you about the lessons specifically that I took away from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because it was really the moment in my career journey of reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad that changed my life in terms of thinking that I was going to go work on Wall Street or be a business executive working for somebody else, to being an entrepreneur, being an investor, creating businesses, and really working to build my own wealth instead of letting somebody else do that. So we're going to talk about the different lessons that I learned today in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My background is I grew up in an amazing family that was well-to-do, not wealthy, but I never wanted for anything in my life, and I'm super grateful for that. I went to college on a scholarship, and it was in college that I learned about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I'd gone through investing classes. I'm a finance major. I'd gone through investing classes and learned about stocks and options and all of this stuff. And it wasn't until I read this book, I always thought, like, what stocks could I invest in? What stocks will I invest in to get me towards my retirement? And it wasn't until I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and really learned that there's another option, that I don't have to necessarily invest in stocks, that I began to really have an enlightenment to set myself on a journey to learn more and more about the, I'll call it alternative investments, but essentially something other than stocks as a means to grow your wealth. So the number one thing I learned is that you don't have to take the traditional route. You don't have to invest in a 401k. You don't have to go and get a job with a company to make an amazing living. You can pretty much provide that on your own. And that's kind of the first thing that I learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is that the rich take care of themselves. The rich take care of themselves, and they don't necessarily depend on other people to do that for them. Okay, the next thing I learned is the difference between assets and liabilities. Okay, most people think that their house is an asset, and I even thought that growing up until I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I realized that your house is not an asset. It can be an asset, but only if you structure it correctly, only if you view it the right way. So I learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad what an asset is and what a liability is. Okay. The next thing that I learned as well, and I know that Robert Kiyosaki is just a lifelong student. I mean, he's written so many different books. He surrounds himself with the best people. But the next thing that I learned is that the rich and the most successful are continuously learning and surrounding themselves with people who want to be better, who want to do better, no matter how good of a position they're in. They're always seeking better information, more guidance to put themselves in a better position. Their business, their wealth, everything about it is to put themselves in a better position. So the third thing I learned is that the rich are always growing and learning. The next thing is that there's a lot of things that in the system we grew up in we take for granted. Like, we take it for granted that you have to pay taxes in your life, that your income has to be taxed. Okay, that's one of the things that the system has taught us, and we're kind of forced into not even questioning it. Well, it wasn't until you educate yourself that you can learn, hey, paying taxes legally is this optional thing that I do. If I do X, Y, and Z, it'll result in 1, 2, 3, and that's a formula. Okay, so if you educate yourself on different principles of how the system is actually structured, you can learn that what you're doing and what you've been taught to do isn't necessarily how things have to be done. And the rich in the world always look at this and say, why does it have to be done like that? Why can't we do it like this? Or, they seek the advice of other people who are smarter than them to help them get the best information and put themselves in a better position. Okay, so the rich are always seeking, I guess we could say what I learned from it essentially is that they don't just take for granted what they're taught, and they're always seeking other better information. So, I guess questioning traditional advice or traditional information. Okay? And the last main important piece that I learned is I always thought about rich as, a big beach house and, sweet cars and everything like that. But one thing I really learned from this is that to be rich is not just monetary. You have to have, are you really rich if you're not healthy? If you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have great relationships, if, spiritually you're not rich, are you really living a wealthy, rich dad lifestyle? And I think the answer to that is no. And I think it's extremely important as you're chasing and pursuing wealth and monetary financial success that you understand that's not the full picture. Because if you've got just an assload of money and you're not happy, what's it worth? If you've got an assload of money but you don't have a great relationship with your wife, girlfriend, mom, dad, whoever it is, what's it all really worth? If you don't have great friends, what's it all really worth? So that's one of the things that success is not just monetary. So these are some of my biggest takeaways from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Obviously, it's not obvious, but many people have read this book. It's probably the #1 financial advice book in the history of the world, maybe besides, the Bible or something like that. But very, very popular book. If you haven't read it, I would highly suggest you get it. I think you can get it on Amazon for like $6 or something like that. Packed with great information. It's a huge mindset shift book, and really the book that I wrote, Skip to Flip, it's completely designed around my journey and what I learned after I read this book on my pursuit of wealth in real estate, the ins and outs of the tactical how-to knowledge. So I kind of think of my book as like a Rich Dad, Poor Dad 2.0. Probably not allowed to say that, and it's in no way affiliated with that. But this is the mindset shift, and then my book is kind of the how-to in the real estate world. It's not the how-to in other things that he advises. Like I don't talk at all in my book, Skip to Flip, about success not being monetary. I just talk about how to make money in real estate, how to save in taxes, how to use other people's money, etc. So if you haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I would highly, highly recommend you do. If you haven't read my book, Skip to Flip, feel free to grab a copy on me, a digital copy. Go to Hayden Crabtree, which is my name, .com/free book. Okay, grab a free copy of my book, #1 new release. If you want to come and join me, talk to us every single day. I have a community on Facebook. Just go to HaydenCrabtree.com. So we'll do this, HaydenCrabtree.com/community. Okay, and just click that link. You'll take it directly to the Facebook group. If you enjoyed this video, if you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, leave in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. What were the top 3, 5, 1 things that you took away from Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Have you read any books? For me, I'd say that's the most impactful book I've read. Have you read any more books more impactful? And if you like this video, if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my channel, and let's keep the relationship rolling. Hope you're doing awesome today. Staying safe, crushing your goals. Be great, and let's get after it.